Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, and today what we're going to be working on is the Sweet Heart Roadster project. So you may remember in the last episode I worked on taking the old firewall out, and we kind of showed you guys what I've been talking about for a while now, the 32 firewall that I was going to be putting in there. Comments were great. We had a lot of back and forth on guys that were still commenting, why don't you just change the firewall, flip it inside out, do that, that's the easiest thing to do. Well, today we're going to do what I want to do. We're going to use the 32 firewall. So I have a vision. Please trust me. I know it's some people think it's a sin to cut up this 32 firewall, but it's for the greater good of the Sweet Heart Roadster project, and I think it's going to look really cool. So I'm going to work on just mocking up the firewall, seeing what I need to do to actually cut it. I want to find out exactly how different it is in shape and size than the original firewall, and then of course see what I need to do to get it actually sunken into the cowl, and then from there we can figure out what we need to do to actually make it a bolt-in affair on the firewall, and we'll just see where we get for today. I've never done one of these before, so you guys are literally going to watch me figure it out as I'm doing it, and maybe we'll try and leave the sound on like we do for a lot of it, so you guys can hear how we talk through some of this stuff. And maybe you can shout at the screen if you think we're doing something dumb or wrong. But hopefully in the end we'll at least have something mocked up that you guys can kind of see what we're going with here, and we don't hopefully ruin a firewall. So let's get started.
Oh, it looks like they like tacked it.
Alright, so we got this just wired up real quick. You guys can see Andrew was nice enough to take the feet off yesterday. I was away doing an Eastwood demo, and now we got this mocked up. Saved me a little bit of time. You guys can see the firewall, it's mainly the band. Now we got it blocked up pretty tall down here, you know, but once we adjust the height, you guys can see it's almost hugging the Model A cowl. So I'm thinking we can take this band off. It looks to me like somewhere, I don't know if I can get it, but somewhere along the way here, right, maybe right there, there's rivets. I think if we drill those rivets out around and take this outer band off, then we'll be left with a firewall with a flange, and it'll be really darn close, and we can either modify this flange or modify something on the firewall, figure out, maybe even make a flange. But I'm going to keep trying to take pieces off till we have, you know, just the bare firewall, and then we can see how close we are from there. But getting there. Let's see how this thing fits now that we chopped it up. Man. Width-wise, that's probably about center where that little groove is. How's your side? Mine's barely too wide. I mean, it's
Down the bottom, actually.
really close.
If you drop the brick, is it going to help you?
I was gonna say, yeah, maybe take the brick out.
Move it down.
What if we turn them on the side?
Too much?
Yeah. That would be mine then, but
Yeah, but yours is, see where it is. I'll make it pop out just a little bit. That'll work. That looks about center there. I'll stick back. Yeah, I don't look that bad. I mean, it got to be sunken in, obviously. But
Well, it looks like
Looks like you got a faster radius though on the corner.
I was gonna say, yeah, just do
on the
it.
body.
You might not even have to trim up the top at all.
yeah, change this radius right in here. You might be able to put a cut all the way up to like the radius and then pull the whole thing in and just close this gap up and pull that radius tight, and that might get it in just enough that you could fit it in.
Yeah, what if you leave this?
Just cut it, is that what you're saying? Cut
Yeah.
Cut like
Cut
a
it along
sliver.
the back and then leave the side band on, the flange.
Yeah, we would cut with a cut-off grinder from the back side straight through, and then you just keep taking away down here until this radius matches, and you pull it all tight, and then we can get it to match. I mean, honestly, we can draw in the back and probably see what it needs to be. Somewhere, you start cutting up here, but then as you come around, you want to almost come right up like that. Down here, come to right there, like that, and then cut all the way along this edge.
Yeah. And then I would just
Pull it in as you go.
suck
Yeah.
it in and see just what you have to make.
Yeah, you could take a little section out there, whatever it is it needs to be. So, maybe we'll get that other firewall down and lay it against here. And we might be able to line up the center of the original firewall with the center of this, trace the radius on either corner, and that'll give us a true radius that it should be, instead of a, sometimes when you trace on here, your marker's angled, you get it. It's not a true radius, it's not right. So, yeah, I like that. That would be pretty easy to accomplish. All right, so what I did was I took my my firewall, we took the flange off, we laid it on the ground, and I had the spare firewall, 3031 firewall, and basically what I did is I laid them kind of back to back, so I want to see basically what we're looking for is kind of around this back edge here. I'm ignoring this front edge because we may trim this back when we're done, but what I'm worried about is getting the firewall to fit back in here. So the back of the Model A firewall, you can see the flange is pretty long on it. So that flange, the holes in the top are here, and the flange probably goes almost to the back of where this steps up, where the chrome trim on a cowl band goes on a 3031. So I want to match up the shape of the firewall back here with where the face of the firewall will sit. So that's why I have them kind of turned back to back, and that'll give me probably the closest representation of how different the shape is. And actually, I am very surprised. So I have it lined up pretty good. I'm going to show you guys. You can see there's very little difference. I mean, along the top edge here, almost exactly the same. And then when we get right here, sorry for the glare or the shadow, right here, you can see the corner is a little different. Now obviously the Model A right in here dips in real hard for how it's built, but I think we can work around that. But just this corner right there, you can see on the Model A, it's a little steeper. So it wraps around, and then but down when we get back to the bottom edge, it tapers, and it's very, very, very close all the way to the bottom. So I think what I could do is take a little sliver cut. We were kind of having a group discussion, and I was going to cut it a different way, but I actually think I might go back to my original method here because it's so close on this side. It's probably the thickness of a cutoff grinder wheel. If we cut slit right down there, same thing on this side, you guys can see very little difference. I know we're jammed against the tire here, so it's so hard to see, but you can see there's very little difference down in here. That gap is, like I said, probably a 1/8 inch or something. You could take a cutoff wheel, make a slice, pull it back together, and that would be all you would need there. It's mainly just this corner here where it wraps around. We got to change, and that's where it's holding us up. So I think if I take a cut somewhere about right here where it starts coming off, maybe even back here, if we cut just inside of the flange right there and then pull it in so that it matches what it's supposed to be, we can weld that flange back up and it won't be too much of an issue. But like I said, laying this on top of each other, there's not much of a difference once you take the cowl band and all that stuff off. 32 Firewall and a 3031 are very, very close. So let's make a couple little strategic cuts and see if we can make this thing start sliding into the Model A here in a few minutes. Alright, after scribing it there, I think you can actually get a better look at it. So I figured I'd get another shot here so you could see where I scribed. I mean, it's just off that edge there. And up here it starts to come up. And we're going to have a dive in right there, where that's where it dives in on the cowl. I think we may be able to actually get rid of that section on the cowl when we trim back, so we may not have to cut in there, but you can see the corner. The difference in the corner, I'm trying to get the light here, you can see not a lot of difference in the grand scheme of things. So we can just take that corner off. Best thing is, if you look on this side, it's not going to really hurt anything. The beads here, it's not going to really change much. We're going to basically kind of like follow my line I have there. So it's just going to pull this flange in the corner in tighter, and then it's going to, on the back side you can see it pretty quickly will come back out and match up. So I think it's just that little bit in the corner there we have to massage, and you can see right over here where I have the light on, just where it goes from barely anything scribed to just that corner being scribed down, and then it goes back to being almost right on the edge. I mean, it's a tiny little slice we take out. So I think it's mainly just that corner we got to change, and we can go from there. Alright, so now that I got the flange cut off, what I'm going to do is cut right on my line here. I drew it in Sharpie just over the center of my scribe to make it a little easier on myself. So I'm going to go right down the center of my Sharpie, take some snips, cut this excess off. The reason I ended up deciding to cut the flange off is because the flange, especially right in this area, had a ton of spot welds in it, and it was going to end up taking a lot of work to even fill all those spot welds that we drilled out. So I figured it'd be easier just to start with a fresh piece of metal. I'll get a piece of 16 gauge here like this is. I believe this is 16 here. And but we'll get a piece of metal that's the same, and we'll put that flange back on with a fresh piece of metal that hasn't been drilled to hell, and it'll just save a handful of our spot weld filling and a little bit extra welding versus welding that old flange back on. So that was the reason I decided to do that. This is going to be a workout to cut for sure, but like I always said, it's the best way when you're trying to cut a nice accurate line. If I have to, I will get the cutoff grinder, but I'll try my best here to cut most of this by hand, and then we can just clean it up with the snip, with the sander at the end. Alright, here's that. So I'll just dress that little bit there with the sander. Alright, so eyeball this, definitely fitting a little better. I think I need to sand a little bit. This one area here I didn't flatten it out quite enough, and I'll have to see where this indent is if I'm going to leave that or cut it off. But I think what we need to do next is cut these feet that I made forever ago. We're going to have to cut them off and probably cut these feet off, clear all that stuff out so we can get this in here. Stinks to cut good stuff, but that's what we got to do in the name of hot rod. Alright, so I got the firewall fit up in. I ended up cutting out all this mess here. Not mess, it's actually all the stuff that we repaired in the front of the Sweet Heart Roadster in the first couple episodes. I cut it out. So kind of sucked, but this is what you gotta do. Unfortunately, I changed my mind and this is the way I want to do it, and I think it looks freaking awesome. Really psyched on how that looks. I just took that little bit you guys saw. I didn't weld the flange back on yet because I wanted to just see how everything fit, but you guys could see in the corners there, the thing fits up really, really nice. Really happy with it. The side cowl pieces like here and over here, those pieces, they're just flopping around. I don't have them obviously tied into anything, so that's why they're sitting out. Now the thing I don't like, that I was kind of waiting until we got the firewall in to decide on, is this lip here. Now I mentioned early on I wanted to cut this lip off, I just didn't know how much. You guys could see how far back this just putting the 32 firewall got us. You could see, stick my hand in there, you guys can see, we're losing quite a bit, but it looks a little funny to leave that huge flange on the firewall. I don't like that. Again, there's some stuff that people do that they may leave that. I just aesthetically, I don't particularly like that. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to start. I don't like to make big cuts until we make a decision fully, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut just on the inside of this lip right here, all the way around. That's going to take off quite a bit, and then I think I can put the edge of the flange for the 32 firewall will kind of butt up against the outside edge of that, and we'll see how that looks there, and then I can kind of adjust from there. But I just don't like that flange sticking out so much, especially here. Look at that. Not okay. So we need to cut that off. So I think you could see if I cut just where that bead is, just behind it, it'll actually end up being about level with the side of the firewall, which would be pretty cool. So I'm going to take the cutoff grinder. I got a real thin set of cutoff wheels I got for this project. That's what I used for cutting the edges of the firewall lip off. And I'm going to do the same thing here, where I'm going to run a real thin cutoff wheel right there carefully against that edge, all the way down around. We're going to cut through one of our repairs. Well, not on this side, but the other side. We actually made a piece, you guys maybe remember in that video. Gonna have to cut through that, but collateral damage. So I'm gonna make a couple cuts, and then we'll check it out, see how it looks from there. But overall, I'm really happy with how it's looking so far. This is spot on. Alright, so got the firewall in, got the front part of the lip on the cowl all trimmed off, and I'm really happy with it. I'm gonna actually stop for the day. I could go a little further, have a little more time, but I'm getting to the point where I don't want to just get ahead of myself being excited, and I'm just keep cutting the cowl apart and then be unhappy with it. So a lot of times with projects like this, or the free tee, where I'm making something that's nice and we're doing a lot of custom work, I don't like to just get focused on getting a job done. I like to focus on getting it to a good point where I can clamp things together, stand back, look at it for a couple days or a week, and just decide if I like how it is, if I want to change it, and so forth. So that's what's, I think what makes sometimes cars really, nail the look of a car or make a custom car just flow really well, is taking that extra time to stand back, give it a couple days, and don't be afraid to change it, throw it away, whatever. But in this case, I'm really happy with how it looks. The only thing that I'm questioning is how much I want to actually take off of this lip here. So I took probably the front inch or so off of that and sunk the firewall in to the point where the face of the 32 firewall is just in front of this front lip here where the cowl band would sit. And that seems to work pretty well. I have the flange on the 32 firewall just about level with where I cut off in the front here. So it works pretty well, but I still think the flange looks just a little big on the cowl, especially when we come down here where the firewall kind of dives out. So I need to stare at that a little bit more, look at how a stock 32 is, and kind of figure out the best thing. The other thing I'm not sure about is, I don't know if that's enough room. That probably moved at the top of the cowl here. That probably gave me where the cylinder heads would be, I don't know, it probably gives me another 2 inches maybe that we slid it back or so, maybe more. But the other thing we have to remember is that the firewall on the 32 is it kicks out at the bottom here, so that's going to also cause some issues if the heads or anywhere near there that we're going to run into it. So I know I'm going to have to cut the firewall in the center to make room for the bell housing. I just want to see, I want to try and reduce how much I'm going to chop it up and try and make it look just like right. So I'm going to stare at this for like a week or maybe a few days, try and figure out what I want to do. I am starting to think about my next step might be that I'm going to split the difference and cut this flange back halfway just behind where all the spot welds and all the holes were. What I'd really like to do with this is once I get my flanges welded on the side and the corners, I'd like to be able to bolt this thing back in kind of like stock. So it'd be really killer to get some like countersunk flathead screws and run them around the outside, and then when you put like some wind lacing on, it will just look like stock, which would be, I think would be really slick. So that's what I'm going for. That's why I'm trying to save that lip, and it's just a balancing act of can I get the engine slid back far enough to get the fan where I need it, but also keep a little bit of this lip so it kind of looks factory, if you will, and it's not just like lopped off. But we will have to see. I don't know. The only thing I do know is I definitely want to keep the cowl band on the cowl, because I think even if I cut this lip off, having that cowl band is going to kind of make it look finished and look right. If I get rid of the cowl band and it just ends there, I think it might look a little awkward because there's no lip at all. So at least if the cowl band's there, it kind of looks finished. It can cover up our seam, etc. So that's the plan. That's the craziness coming out of my head. But most importantly, we got the firewall cut down, and I was really surprised how little I had to take out of the firewall. I mean, in the corners, I only probably took, I don't know, a quarter, maybe half an inch at tops. In the majority of that, the corners where I was cutting, and it tapered off from there. A lot of it was like, I don't know, it's a 1/16 or 3/16 that we actually took out to just change the radius so it all flowed, and everything fits really nicely. Now what I can do is make that flange, and I can just take a strip and bend it around the cowl and just weld right on that corner, and then blend the corner in, and it'll be really nice, and it'll look like factory. So but I'm going to wait to do that flange till the very end, so I'm happy with everything. I have the whole top flange here that we can clamp and fixture everything with, and I can even get some screws drilled in there and tightened down so that I make sure that everything's how I want. So I'm pretty happy with that. So next time what I'm going to work on is getting all that stuff fixed and kind of closer and make the final modifications, and hopefully by next time we'll maybe have something that we can actually bolt in and maybe start test fitting the actual engine and trans in and see how it's going to work. So that's all I have for this one. I appreciate you guys following along, and definitely if you like the Sweet Heart Roadster project, we're going to continue to work on this regularly now that I'm back on it. I'm definitely really excited and going to keep trying to at least work on it once a week and get just little steps going every time, and before we know it, the car will be about where I want it to be. So as always, we do videos on Tuesdays, Fridays, Sundays. If you haven't, definitely subscribe and drop us a comment down below. What do you think? Is it a sin that I cut up this 32 firewall, or do you think it's looking pretty bitchin' now that it's in here and all set and just about done? Thanks guys, catch you later.